a reminder that last week I gave you all sorts of tools that will help you with your drawing. And one of those tools was a plastic sheet like this with a viewfinder, a bit of tape around and some lines drawn on there, and that's called a viewfinder, and there's another variation of the viewfinder. And we use those viewfinders literally to find a view. So typically speaking, we use them out and about when we are looking at scenery and landscape. We can also use them for a still life, if you've got a still life, and you can put that viewfinder between you and the view that you are looking at. And I'm going to show you how to place this to your best advantage to create a composition. Now, I do also need to tell you a little bit about something called the golden ratio. That ratio, as I said, is 1 to 0.618. So what I've done here, this blue box here, that is 1. So that is a square. So 1 is that distance there, that distance, that distance, and that distance. Now, the full distance of that rectangle as opposed to the square, I've added 0.6 on. So that's 1.6. So that's actually 10 centimeters. So that's a useful way of doing it. That's 10 centimeters, and I've added another 6 centimeters. So it's 1.6 long of that 1. Okay, and that is the golden ratio. And what happens is this: as soon as you've got this golden ratio, you can use the short side, so that's that 0.6 side. If you turn that into square, the remaining rectangle will also be a golden rectangle. And if you turn that into 1, then that will be 0.6. And if I take a little piece of paper, now I know this is quite complicated, but if I go, the short side is that, because I want to make a square, and I put it there, then that is going to be, that little rectangle there is also a golden ratio. So a golden rectangle, which means the ratio of 1 to 1.6. And we can go and go and go until everything is so tiny that we can't do anything more. It can go on infinitely. And nature is built around this ratio. So you can see it's going smaller and smaller. I'm just making a guess there. And you'll see spirals that fit in and all sorts of things. Now, what does that have to do with our viewfinder? Well, 1 to 0.618 is, we can dumb it down basically. The closest thing we can do is thirds if we want to dumb it down. And that's why on the viewfinder I have put the string across so that there's equal thirds on the short end and equal thirds on the long end. A viewfinder is a dumbed down version of our golden ratio, and we work in thirds. And you might find a lot of books, art books, talk about the rule of thirds. Well, actually, the reason why it works for composition is because of that ratio. That ratio is one that we are automatically attracted to. The universe is built of this ratio. Our own bodies are built on this ratio. From your shoulder to your elbow is 1, and 1.6 is from your elbow to the rest of your hand, the rest of your arm, for example. The if you take the length of your wrist, the length of your fingers is 1 to 1.6, which is from your fingers to your wrist. So there's all sorts of places in nature where this ratio exists. And so we have come to understand that that is the most attractive, is very attractive for us. And we base our drawings on that, and we use our rule of thirds for that. So let me give you an example. Let's say, and your rectangle that you work with doesn't necessarily have to be that golden ratio for this attraction to work. Although some artists do work with a canvas that is similar. Okay, so if I draw that on my page, when we're talking about composition, what you need to do and need to be aware of is to place something of interest on something that's horizontal, either on that line, the bottom third line, or on, let's change colored pencils here, or on the top third line. So if I'm doing a landscape and I have an interesting land mass here and lots of things happening, then I would probably put my horizon line on the upper 2/3. However, if I have a very interesting sky, and I'm actually going to extend that, and then I'm going to block this out. If we've got an interesting sky, then I might put my horizon on the lower third and then have this interesting stormy sky going on there. So that's one way to choose whether to use the bottom third or the top third for your horizon line. What doesn't particularly look good is the horizon line going straight through the middle. If I bring that back, I've got a square there, and now that red line that I've put in is dead center. So you can see that that's dead center, and it's quite boring to have that, your horizon line dead center. Now, one of the reasons that occurs is because of our cameras. Now, before we had digital cameras and we had little screens to look at, and you could hold your camera lower down, we used to bring your camera right up to your face. Now, I'm not sure if you know, I've probably mentioned it before, the horizon that you can see is the same as your eye level. So if you're putting your camera up to your face like that, the horizon naturally goes in the middle of your photograph because your eyes are in the middle of that camera, okay? So taking your picture with your camera further down or further up will give you a different place for your horizon. The other thing the other way you can do that is to tilt your camera a little bit so it's looking down at the horizon, or it's looking up at the sky and the horizon is higher up. So those are some tips when you're actually looking at looking through your camera. On that note, on camera note, all of our phones on the digital setting for your camera will have a grid on or off little setting, and the setting is this 3x3 grid, and it's particularly there so that you can compose your pictures. Okay, so it's a pretty good viewfinder. Back to our design. So you can see middle is a bit boring. You will of course see some paintings, photographs that break those rules. They're not cast in stone. They are there especially when you're starting out to give you the best opportunity of composing the best drawing or photograph, and typically it gets used all the time. But sometimes somebody does put something right in the middle because they want something very dramatic. Now, by the same token, as not putting your horizon in the middle. You don't put a tree or a person or whatever you're taking a photograph of, you try not to put them right in the middle as well. Okay, so from a compositional point of view, that is not particularly attractive. So I'll start again just a little bit lower, and I'll show you how we can change our boring setup. And this doesn't matter whether you've got a horizontal work or a vertical work. So now if I put some third lines in, now you can see I'm not measuring for these third lines. Estimations are good enough. Wherever these lines intersect, that is a good place to put your focal point. And your focal point is the part of the picture that you want people to focus on. And it's usually the place where there's the strongest dark and light happening. So let's say we want to do, we're still working with a landscape, and I'm going to put a low landscape in there. I'm going to put my tree on this third. Let's say the sun is coming in from there. It's casting a shadow like that. So we've got our dark and light happening on that third intersection there. Okay, I know we've got a shadow coming off there. We might have the shadow of the tree, but that composition is much, much more interesting than the one above where everything is in the middle. So, how does this work in practice? Well, of course, what I've said to you is holding up the viewfinder and you move it around. If you've got something in your hand like this, you can move it closer and further away. You'll have to do it yourself to see how things get affected the further away you look. Obviously, if you look straight through like this, you'll be able to see a lot. And if you take it further away from you, you can't see as much. Thanks, Janice. Say hello to Caitlin for me as well. So I'm going to go to my South African book because I've been looking at this, and you'll notice that when you look at good photographic books, they have really beautifully composed photographs. If you look at this lady here, I don't know if you can see the whole picture. There you go. You can see that the main focus is on the bottom left-hand third. Can you see that? So that's where your main darks and lights are all together. These little negative shapes happening here. She is about on the third on the left and a little bit higher. So many photographs have that ratio. Now that one's quite square, and this person is trying to show how vast these plains are. That horizon line is on the lower third, and there are 2/3 of the clouds. In fact, those forward clouds there, those clouds that are closer to us, that band of dark there, is probably close to the top third as well. We haven't got any verticals, so we don't need to worry about that. So all of these pictures, most of them go to that ratio. Look for compositions in photographs with a viewfinder. And I made a viewfinder. Remember last week I just drew very ragged lines. I've improved my lines now and I've got them a bit straight. If you put your viewfinders on other photographs, you can find different views. Okay, so we've got some fishermen fishing there. If I wanted to just put him in the picture, for example, if I put him there, so I've now put the sea, the horizon, right in the middle, and I've put him right in the middle. That is quite boring. Now he's looking off to the left, so if I shift that down so that the horizon is, or shift the viewfinder up, the horizon is now on the third, and he is on the third as well. I can take that bloke out, and now I've got a much nicer composition with that sky framing him. So that's really nice. So that's an example of finding a composition within a photograph. Now, clearly that person has decided to put that sunflower smack bang in the middle because it's very, very dramatic like that. And he hasn't, or she hasn't worried about it being 2/3 and 1/3, although that background is much lower. It's probably less than a third down, but it still works. Let's see if we can find some other little views. Okay, there we've got some trees in the top. We've got that dark, lovely shadow section there, and then we've got the grass in the front, and we've got the horse around that intersection. So the rule of thirds is so beautiful. We often have a foreground and a middle ground and a background. That's also part of the rule of thirds. I wish you all a lovely, lovely week. Karen Frankel signing off and saying, get drawing. Bye-bye.